Welcome to Keto Meals and Recipes.com. For today's recipe, I got my inspiration from watching Shrek and Fiona enjoy their roasted rats over an open fire. They looked so yummy, and since they seem to be enjoying them a lot, as another fun Halloween treat, I thought I would prepare my version of fried rats on a stick. The macronutrient ratio for these rats is 2.2 to 1, with 3.9 grams of total carbs, 1.3 grams of soluble fiber, 1.4 grams of insoluble fiber. There are 3 parts to this project: preparing the meat, making the batter, and then pan frying the rats. So let's get started. For this recipe, I prefer to use a pork tenderloin, which I removed all the silver skin off of. Then I cut each piece of tenderloin into triangle shapes. For this first piece, I started cutting the head out first, but what I should have really done is cut the fat piece in exactly half. And if one side is too thick, just trim it off a little. You want each of the pieces to be about 1.3 centimeters or 1/2 inch thick sections. Then, as I showed earlier, at about the 1/3 point of the tip of the triangle, cut a diagonal slip on each side. The slit should be at a slight angle, leaving a well-connected area for the neck. For best results and to make it look most like a head, if you want, trim a bit of the meat from the neck to make it more of a head shape. Then at the bottom of the 3rd point of the body, make a slit on each side to make the front and back legs. Then repeat and do the same for all the other triangles until you have prepared all your rats. Although I prefer to use pork tenderloin, other kinds of meat you could use are a regular pork loin, or another really good alternative is to use chicken breasts. And some people also like to use a good quality steak. In order for the rat to keep its shape as you're frying, there are 2 things you can do. First, you can use thin strips of carrot inserted at each limb to hold the shape. However, I find this a bit more difficult. An easier thing that I have found and what I prefer to do is to use long toothpicks, and starting at the bottom limb, push my toothpick diagonally to the top limb on the opposite side of the body to make a crisscross section. Then repeat with either method until you have shaped all the rats. For the tail, I make a deep, small slit where the bottom of the rat will be and where I'm going to insert the tail. I use one of the long strips of carrots to make the tail. Insert the carrot tail into the slit. Then repeat the same procedure for all the rats. And here you can see what they would look like with each of the 2 methods. To effectively coat the rats with the batter, it's important to first dry the meat very well with a paper towel. This is so that the batter will coat and stick to the meat. Then lightly salt and pepper both sides of the rats, and set your prepared rats aside for a while. The next step is to make the batter coating. Place the dry ingredients for the batter into a small metal sieve over a mixing bowl. Here I added my almond and coconut flour, the glucomannan, whey protein isolate, salt, sweetener, baking powder, and using a whisk, stir until all your dry ingredients have been sifted. Whisk the dry ingredients in the bowl in order to make sure that all the ingredients are combined thoroughly. Now to add the wet ingredients to the mixing bowl. First I added the eggs, then I combined the cream, water, and melted butter, stirred them together, and then I poured the liquid into the bowl. And using my whisk, I stirred everything to combine the ingredients. If you're noticing that your batter is looking a little bit too thick, just add a little bit more water and keep stirring until the batter mixture has a good consistency. You want the batter to be thick but not solid. I prefer to make my batter in one go instead of using the 3-bowl method, where you have the 1 bowl for the coconut or whey protein isolate powder, another bowl for your egg wash, and a 3rd bowl for your crumbs layer, and you have to do each step one at a time. In my opinion, the batter method is easier and faster. If your meat is very moist, if you want the batter to stick really well, here's an optional step you can do. You can coat each piece of meat with either whey protein isolate, which does not add more carbs to the recipe, or you could use coconut flour, which does add a few more carbs to the recipe. Now for the 3rd step, which is to heat your oil or lard on a medium heat setting. If you have a cooking thermometer, you want the oil to be 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. When the oil is at the right temperature, I dip each of the prepared rats into batter one at a time. And by the way, make sure you coat the tail as well. You may want to flip the rat in the batter once or twice until all sides are well coated. Depending on the consistency of your batter, this may take a few attempts to ensure you have a nice thick layer of batter. Once your rats are coated, handle the rats with care as you place them into the hot oil. And place only 2 or 3 rats into the frying pan at a time. Make sure you leave plenty of room between each rat. When they're in the oil, fry until the underside is deeply golden brown, and then using your tongs, carefully flip the rats over. And fry until that side is also a deep golden brown. Depending on the thickness and the kind of meat you're using, the time needed to fry your rats per each side will vary. For my pork loin rats, it took about 2 to 3 minutes per side. Here's a helpful suggestion I'd like to share with you. If you don't have a cooking thermometer, a good way to gauge if the oil is the right temperature, which is sizzling but not boiling, is by using either a chopstick or some sort of wooden skewer, dipping it in the oil and watching for bubbles around the wood. You want fairly fast bubbles, not sluggish bubbles that stick to the wood. It's important that the oil is at the correct temperature. For example, if the oil is not hot enough, you may end up with greasy rats that look cooked on the outside but contain raw meat on the inside. Alternatively, if the oil is not hot enough, you'll find that the batter will come off the meat very easily, especially when you're flipping the rat over with your tongs. Another tip I'd like to pass along: if the carrot tail comes off, use your tongs and carefully remove the tail from the pan and set it aside. They can be reattached later. When your rats are nicely fried on both sides, using the tongs, I carefully remove them from the oil and place them on a cooling rack. By the way, if you need to reinsert the tail, you may have to use the knife to reopen the spot where you originally placed the tail. Just insert it and there you are. The last thing I did to make this meal a little bit more fun, I inserted a shish kebab stick through the center of the body and through the head. Lastly, I'd just like to mention, if you're serving these rats to children, please don't forget to remove the toothpicks before you give them to the children. They'll keep their shape at this point. Also, caution your adult guests about the toothpicks. Removing the toothpicks is very important because they are a choke hazard. You want a happy and safe Halloween. Enjoy. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. In my next video, I will show you how to make my Keto Pizza Pocket skulls. As always, the link for the printable recipe will be provided in the description below.